amazing.
Right.
After that tempo, I was great. It's such incredible music. Thank you all so much, and thank you, Beethoven. You know, you hear the music and you remember these pieces that you've heard uh, most of the time separately, and you say, "Oh yes, I didn't remember that was from 18.2 or 59.3 or 135." I must say, what gave me goosebumps, and it does every time, is the third movement, the slow movement from the 135. And I was thinking, uh, I've always been thinking about how can we get people who are not familiar with classical music to uh, give open ears and to try it, to listen to it, because I think so much of it, of music, of not only classical music, but all kinds of music, really is universal. And people with divergent tastes can really enjoy lots of music. I know, I do. I love jazz. I love musical theater as well as classical. There's lots of uh, pop stuff, Simon and Garfunkel, and lots of other people. I remember when the Beatles started, and watching the Ed Sullivan Show with my parents, who emigrated from Germany, were lucky enough to get out in 1935. So it was pretty foreign to them, and even foreign to my sister and me. And then after a couple of years, it became like Simon and Garfunkel became later. It became something that one really got into. So I was thinking that that movement, when I was listening to that, that's one of those pieces that I think anybody could love and enjoy. And I think you guys should issue it as a single, and see if we can't get pop music stations to play it too. And you know, Borodin, became a hit in. They used his music in Kismet musical. Uh, and Chopin's music has been co-opted by Billy Joel or other people. So give it a try.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if any of the people who have joined us from the audience have any questions, or in the meantime, while we're waiting for some questions, uh, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the various Beethoven's periods that we're going to be hearing for the next 3 years in hearing the cycle, and what were the primary differences between the Opus 18 quartets, the 59 quartets, and the late quartets? Maybe you could tell us a little about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that we love Beethoven so much is that he changed so much throughout his life. And I think he's often sort of renowned for that, for pushing himself to really develop tremendously. And his early period, which just involves the first 6 Opus 18 quartets, generally speaking, I mean, now we look back on them as feeling very classical, but still having a great deal of creativity and passion. And 18.1, for instance, which we haven't gotten to yet in this particular cycle, but he writes in the slow movement of that it's supposed to be the death of Romeo and Juliet. It's very operatic, which had been very unusual for a quartet at that time. So he was clearly already being creative, but we now think of them as very classical compared to what he did later. But it was funny, I was just reading that when they first came out, the Opus 18s, people actually thought they were really wild and hard to listen to. So I can't imagine what they thought in the late period. But yeah, then the middle period, I mean, he was really confident. It seemed really easy for him to write. It becomes a little bit more romantic, but certainly very virtuosic, and all 4 instruments are sort of being pushed to their maximum abilities technically. and they're sort of all used as like 4 solo instruments almost, but just incredibly natural string quartet writing. I don't know if you guys want to jump in too about the middles. It's like,
Oh, I think it's totally. I think for me, like, I think the middles were some of the first Beethovens that I ever heard, and I think it sounded like completely different music. And what I remember, kind of sticking with me is just how thickly they're written and how much the voices kind of move together and also in opposite directions, but that everything is kind of active over all the time. You're never at a place where really anyone's just kind of holding a chord and it's like someone's voice on top. It's everyone's always part of something greater. And I think that's what he did so beautifully. And he does, I mean, especially the opus, I think like the 59s are like kind of the shining example of that in my opinion. But yeah, totally. I agree with all of that. And the late, who can even explain about the late? I feel like I'm not even sure that I really understand what he was doing. And I think what's so awesome about it is having performed 3 cycles before, coming back to all of these and getting to spend time and of course through the recording, you notice so many new things in each one of them, and every time there's a renewed appreciation for his genius. And I think it's you just kind of notice like a little motive here, or something that he brings in such a unique way in another place, and you don't even notice it. It's just so geniusly crafted. It's incredible.
And at what point did he start to lose his hearing?
he lost his hearing pretty early, actually. I think it was honestly probably not much after the 18s that he was completely deaf. I think he was pretty young.
Yeah, I thought for sure by the middles he was already almost completely deaf, if not completely.
It's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? That somebody with it's like an artist who loses their sight, and I know somebody personally who still created, plus many historic artists who also were able to create great art. So, in a sense, we shouldn't count anyone short who has some sort of a disability in terms of the creative process. If it's there, it seems that very often they can override those disabilities and create something that we're talking about hundreds of years later. It's really quite extraordinary, I think.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we had a question from Steve Spiegelbaum, is that right? About being able to hear a transition away from Haydn in Opus 18 number 2. And yeah, I mean, that certainly seems exactly right. I think it's kind of hard to describe because we know the classical sort of syntax when we hear it, like in the first movement, it seems quite classical, and it almost, I mean, it's a different style, but you can imagine it being an adventurous Haydn. But I think for me, it's in the second movement where he's combining, again, almost like an operatic singing style, really, really full, warm lines in the first violin and later in the cello, and this really funny, middle section to it. That sounds really different from anything that Haydn wrote, and just the sort of so something operatic about it, something really like a singer would do in style and in syntax again. And it's because it seems like Haydn, when he composed for the string quartet, it was really like there was a style he used only for chamber music, which was very much call and response and question answer, and the first violin was kind of taking over most of the time. And this seems like Beethoven's thinking that maybe the quartet can do more than that, and it clearly could.
Yeah, I feel like for me, in some ways, this 18-2 is like the most refined of all of them. It's actually very fiendishly difficult, and I feel like he uses silence in such an amazing way, especially in the first movement. And I feel like, in some ways, I feel like the first movement it's clearly very ornate, but it has that like kind of classical. But with each movement, I feel like, and maybe the third movement actually is also incredibly classical. But 2 and 4 definitely seem to have a little more grit. I kind of love in the fourth movement those long sections where they're just in one key for a really long time. He's just kind of vamping on the key, the yum bum bum yum bum bum da 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 da, and he just kind of like hits you over the head kind of with this arpeggio. And he's using the motive, of course, that he starts out with, but he really doesn't mind keeping you in a place and really hoping that you're not questioning where he's going to go. And he always does something incredibly inventive with that, and really explores some kind of crazy keys. Actually, in some ways, kind of also similar to Haydn. So I feel like both, yeah, a tremendous departure in certain ways, but in some ways not departed at all. It's kind of.
I would, yeah, sorry.
No, go
I would
ahead.
definitely agree with Camden too, that it's just each part, all four parts, I think are much more involved over Haydn, I would think. Yeah, there's more virtuosity spread around the group for sure.
Well, you talk about certain sections sounding operatic. I feel that Mozart, who wrote some of the most incredible operas ever, in so much of his music, you have an operatic feel. Is that true in his quartets as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but it certainly feels a very different style from Beethoven. But yeah, there is so much singing in Mozart. Something else, really, a small thing that I was thinking of trying to understand why Beethoven quartets feel different is that even Mozart and Haydn both did this, where in the accompaniment they would almost never just have running eighth notes like bum 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 bum, sort of relentlessly like that. Usually there would be like a downbeat, yum bum 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 yum bum bum bum, or the cello would play the downbeat, and like second violin and viola would just play bum 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 bum, that kind of thing, and it really keeps it going. And I think it keeps the downbeats feeling lighter because it's not just relentless. But Beethoven loves just having relentless eighth notes. And like in the last movement of 18-2, already yum bum 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 dun 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 dun. It's just like you can imagine him just hammering the piano every
Yeah,
single eighth.
exactly. It's like,
Yeah, totally feels different. It's really cool.
a lot more relentless for sure. Yeah, I think that's a good word for it.
And what is remind us, what are the times of Haydn and Mozart where you say the style was much lighter? How much later did Beethoven come after them? And was there somebody in between? Was there a bridge? Or did we go from Haydn to Mozart, who was similar in certain ways, directly to Beethoven? At least in the quartet idiom.
I'm gonna have to get my history book out for this
Yeah.
one. Music history book.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's really hard.
you can do some research and we can talk about it for your next concert.
I mean,
I
I feel like he was always just kind of. It's hard to know if he was already out to set his own voice from the beginning, or if it was just in his homage to all of those guys that he was trying to write like them, but just already had such a distinct style and such a distinct voice from the beginning. I suppose for me, we all sit around and talk about like how unique kind of he was from the beginning, and I'm not sure that that was an intention or if it was just natural. In the way that we talk about Mendelssohn, who obviously respected Beethoven tremendously and modeled many of his works right after Beethoven. The feeling is that he was trying his best to kind of be like Beethoven, and of course we don't really know, but was at least like showing tremendous respect. And I feel like with Beethoven, it's just hard to know. I feel like his voice was pretty pronounced from the beginning, even though it clearly changed over a long period of time.
Well, one could say that his music was more dramatic, wouldn't you say?
For sure.
Yeah.
Even if it's just
And weightier, perhaps.
yeah, I think it was very contrasting from the very beginning. He's already playing with subidos like very very early on. That's certainly not something you see from early Haydn or anything like that. And even Mozart, I feel like he plays around with it, but it's certainly not until much later. Beethoven,
Yeah, subidos and sforzando dynamics really prevalent.
very surprising.
He knew what he was doing, man.
It
He
would be
did.
good to be that good that fast, but nothing comes that easy.
Yeah, he was still in his 20s, right? For the 18s, 18s. Like
Yeah.
28, 29. Yeah. Crazy.
So what is the Joel, the cap with a T on it?
The cap. Oh, with the. Are you talking about this one or the other one? This one.
Yeah, can't see the dark one.
No,
Oh, the P.
is it a P?
That's
Oh,
a Phillies hat.
oh, Phillies hat. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It looked like a T from here.
I'll grab it and put it on.
The Philadelphia Tillies.
There you go.
You're a Yankees fan, Frank?
No, I'm an Atlanta Braves fan.
Really?
From the time
Wow.
they were in Boston in 1945, I read an article in Sport Magazine about Billy Southworth, who was the manager of the Boston Braves.
Wow.
And I was a Yankee fan, but in the National League, I didn't like either the Giants or the Dodgers. So I was looking for somebody to root for. And Southworth sounded like a great guy. And in the article, it said that his son was a fighter pilot and he lost his life in the Second World War. And so I felt badly for him. So I started rooting for the Braves. And those were the days when they had two great pitchers. The rest of the team wasn't too great, but they had Warren Spahn and Johnny Sain. And there was a saying, Spahn, Sain, and 3 days of rain. That's the only way they were going to win the pennant, because they only had those two pitchers and they didn't have a great hitting team. But then they moved to Milwaukee and then Atlanta. And Atlanta, they've done very well. They never get there to the World Series, or only once, but they won the division title something like 13-4. Well, I guess
It was
this
like
year
15.
was
Yeah.
the 14th time they won the division, but then the Dodgers knocked them out. Who do you guys root for other than the Phillies?
Well,
Do
I
you follow other sports or only baseball?
I grew up in Atlanta, Frank. So most people, when I wear a Phillies hat and they know I'm from Atlanta, they're like, "How could you not have supported Atlanta when they won the pennant like 14 times?" I didn't really follow baseball as a kid, but yeah, I definitely follow other sports. I'm a big soccer fan. So
Yes.
yeah, Brian's a big basketball dude.
Yep. And tennis.
Yeah, tennis as well.
Yeah, I follow mostly sailing and track and field. Not the most popular sports out there, but they're still awesome.
Somebody's asking if our conversation is on tape so they can hear it again. Maybe they missed something. Yet, yes, it is. Both the pre-concert, the concert, and the conversation we're having now will be available through Friday. So you can listen again. And we had a lovely comment from somebody in the audience saying that she loved the Vladimir Felsman concert that we had last Saturday, and the discussion afterwards. And she said she listened to the concert a number of times. So that's one of the benefits of our being able to stream, even though we all would rather be together in person. Let me see. No, that's it. So unless anyone else from the audience has a question, or you folks would like to add something, we can call it an evening and look forward to your next Beethoven concert in the spring, which is on a different series. And I do encourage all the folks who are still with us to let their friends and family anywhere in the country and around the world know that they can listen in, and we will send people the concerts that have already taken place as well. So thank you again for a great concert. Have a happy holiday and look forward to seeing you in the new year, which hopefully will be a better year for all of us. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much, Frank.
Bye,
See you next
thanks.
time.